Please welcome to the stage Vice President, Power Platform Intelligent Applications, Ryan Cunningham.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. You're still here in Las Vegas. That's great. Thank you for coming out this morning. And I think I want to open this with just really a ton of deep gratitude to all of you for this week and for what you do. This is one of the highlights of my year, getting to spend time with this community. And the last couple of days, I've just heard so many amazing stories of what people are doing with Power Platform. And it's so cool to see how this community has grown and diversified and expanded and gotten into more sophisticated areas over the last couple of years. I've talked to people who are using Power Platform to help dairy farming operations, and people who are using Power Platform to help, serve at-risk youth, and people who are using Power Platform, to help equip the people who are helping us get to space, and everything in between, and that is just awesome. But speaking of space, if you zoom out a little bit, this whole world of business applications, business software, Power Platform, it's really just one constellation in a much larger galaxy of software, of technology, of productivity. And what's cool is that as this community grows and as the technology itself changes in this world of AI, those lines get to kind of blur, and we meet all kinds of different people and contexts that we didn't expect. And so what I'm excited about this morning is to really be able to bring some of those voices to the table. People that we don't normally encounter in our lives in the world of business applications and Power Platform. But one of the cool things of being at Microsoft is there are just so many amazing thinkers and luminaries and researchers in all these different spaces. And we're really lucky to have 3 of them joining us here today at the Power Platform Conference. And so I'm excited to just have a conversation with this broader world. And so to start that off, I would love to invite up Thomas Dohmke, who is the CEO of GitHub. Can you all help me welcome Thomas to the stage? Yeah.
Woo!
All right.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you?
Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah.
So, what brings you to a windowless room in Las Vegas? No, I kid. But really, I'd love to actually start and hear a little bit more about your story. How have you come to be the leader of what is arguably one of the most important tools for software developers on the planet?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say, though, thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's day 3, or if you did the workshops, maybe day 4, day 5 for you. Conferences are long. It's also an awful early time for a conference session, 8 in the morning. So thank you for joining us this morning. And I think you're here for the same reason that I'm here, which is passion for software. Ever since I grew up, and when I was 11 or 12 years old, I saw a computer in a shopping window in East Germany. I couldn't buy one, but I found a similar computer in school, and I started coding with BASIC and cassette tapes. Got a Commodore 64 when the wall fell, and then a 386 DX40 with a turbo switch. And back in the day, in the early 90s, learning coding was like buying books and magazines, hoping that somebody at Computer Club knew something about the questions you had. There was no internet you could go to where you could ask questions. And then the internet came. I joined university in '98, and one of the big benefits was that you get a free dial-in on a landline, so you didn't have to pay for CompuServe or AOL. I was on the AOL side. And then the world of open source opened up, right? And all of a sudden you found all these friends in the internet all the way around the world. Today, the software industry, the open source industry, is one of the largest team sports on earth. Nothing else on this planet has 1 million+ people working together on something, without any barriers, without any borders. Typically, you don't even know what the person's name or title is. And I experience always the same here at Power Platform community conference, which is people are just wanting to talk, wanting to chat. I remember last year I was in line with a coffee robot, and somebody just chatted with me and saying, I come here because all these people love engaging with us and love talking to me.
Yeah, no, I love that too about this group, and it's awesome. And what a story to just grow up through all of this amazing change that we've had. Speaking of origin stories, GitHub and CoPilot really was the origin of this whole CoPilot movement for us, and that's been quite a journey. I'd love you to say a little bit more about, sort of how that evolution has happened inside of your organization.
It's interesting, to think about that the original CoPilot, we started working on this in summer 2020, right? It was, and remember 2020, you couldn't actually be in a room like this. And we were on, a call, and one of our team members had early access to GPT-3, and we were just dictating ideas of what you could ask the model, and it was able to write JavaScript code, and it put the parentheses and all that in the right place, and then you ask about Python, and all of a sudden it does colons instead of, semicolons, and I was like blown away because the models even today don't have a semantic understanding of the language. They're not compilers where the structure is built in, and then we figured, okay, so the best thing we can build at this point in time is auto-completions, right? The original CoPilot was so simple because when the model made a mistake, you just kept typing. You didn't even have to think, okay, so how do I prompt, to figure it out? I just kept typing, and if I don't like what it gives to me, I just can ignore it. And so, through that journey, obviously we started adding chat, and when ChatGPT came out, and ChatGPT was that big bang moment. And I know, Ryan, you did a lot of customer meetings here in Vegas as well. My biggest memory of ChatGPT will always be that until ChatGPT came, most of my briefings with customers were 95% DevOps and Agile development and no-code, low-code, pro-code. Thomas, what's the future? And if I started talking about AI, they were like, that's the future, go away, Thomas. And then ChatGPT came, and ever since I've been only talking about AI. That's what it feels like, maybe 5% about software security and other topics.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast that has changed in the world. I do want to talk a lot more about AI, but I actually want to come back to one of the first things you said about just how amazing these communities are around the world. And I think one of the things that's really special about GitHub and about Power Platform and Microsoft more broadly, we don't just make one product. We're platform organizations, and platforms thrive on ecosystems and partnerships and interaction with lots of different types of people. How is that changing for developers? What does that world of extensibility and partnership and ecosystem mean in your eyes right now?
The way we really think about this is as a stack, right? And the CoPilot stack has been prevalent for a while now. It starts, at the GPU layer, where there's different GPUs for different use cases. There's, different types of models. Obviously, large language models play a big role, and there's a lot of innovation happening in that large language model space. In fact, in August, we launched a model marketplace on GitHub called GitHub Models, where you can play with GPT-4, 4.0 and 4.0 Mini, and since yesterday with 0.1 and 0.1 Mini, but you also have Llama 3 and 5 3.5 and Mistral, and you can just type prompts and figure out, okay, what does the model say, and you can open it in 2 different tabs to compare things, and then you have the parameters like the temperature and the context window on the side. And so that's, on that stack, on the lower level, there's a lot of innovation happening. Mentally, I like to think about this. My mental model of that is, the model is what used to be the CPU in your computer. And there's different, there used to be RISC and CISC CPUs, and now they're, it's Intel and AMD and ARM. And you can swap them out, and they have different pros and cons. But they play an important part of your experience on your computer, and the same is true for the model. And then obviously, as you move up the stack, there is the Azure AI platform that all the copilots here at Microsoft and GitHub are built on. I think it's actually the first time ever in Microsoft's history that we're building all on top of the same stack from day one, right? Typically, it's like 2-3 teams building their own thing, and then everybody unifies on the new stack, but those first 3 teams never move over. I'm sure, Ryan, you have seen that, because they're like,
we don't have any of those issues in Power Platform, don't we?
No legacy whatsoever.
No legacy,
right? And then on top of that is, the ecosystem with Copilot extensions, and I know Power Platform was, one of the early supporters of that plugin extensibility model, and we announced extensions public preview actually earlier this week, and we have a bunch of extensions that we built ourselves, for example, at GitHub, as you can, in GitHub Copilot chat, ask about your GitHub issues and your GitHub repos and whatnot. But I heard from you backstage that Power Platform also now has a Copilot extension for GitHub Copilot.
Exactly, for GitHub Copilot for Power Pages developers. Very cool if you haven't seen that yet.
And of course, many customers want to build their own extensions, because the reality today is that every company has their own stack, right? They have combined different tools together. There isn't just one vendor and one tool that anyone is using. It's a combination of different tools. We're part of an ecosystem where GitHub is a Planet a big one, I think.
Yep.
Power Platform is one, and there's lots of other smaller planets, moons,
Yep.
satellites, rockets, up-and-coming startups,
Yep.
asteroids, and whatnot. And they all need to work together, because the hardest thing in our industry today is that, whether you're coming out of college or you're already in a company or you're switching companies, switching projects, you always have to learn again the institutional knowledge of that team, right? Nothing is exactly how you learned it when you were a kid working on a hobby project. And let's face it, the hobby projects, that is what coding is actually all about. That's the biggest fun. Raise your hand if you're writing unit tests when you're coding at home on a Sunday. I guess not, or unless you're so convinced that you need to test your own code. And the same is true for no-code and low-code. So I think bringing that extension ecosystem into Copilot, into all the Copilots, letting the Copilots connect with each other, will make these primitives so much more powerful.
100%, yeah. I love the point that the sort of planets are always moving, the terms are always changing, and we talk a lot about this age of AI as if it's this very big, ambiguous, scary thing in front of us, but it really is changing a lot of expectations of what developers need to do and what they need to think about and what tool sets they need. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you think about the tools that developers need and how that's changing in this time?
The first thing I want to say is, it has always changed, right? Like when in the 80s, I remember still punch cards in my mom's office, and COBOL was a thing, and COBOL still is a thing. If you're in the financial services industry, I'm sure you have coworkers that are still managing COBOL code on mainframes, which also shows you how long it takes us to move off the legacy, the tech debt, into a more modern world. I mentioned cassette tapes. Even after we had hard drives, the hard drives were way slower than the built-in caches and the memory, so you had to think really hard about how you architect your applications, loading certain parts. I mean, I think MS-DOS 6 came on 3 floppy disks, and Windows came on like 7 floppy disks, and so installer had to know when to switch disks and things like that. And every time we went through these iterations, the internet, open source, mobile, the cloud, I think most developers got excited again because they figured, okay, I can make my life a bit more productive, a bit more efficient, so I can tackle more ideas and more innovation. At the end of the day, we are all constrained by the time that we have in our lives, in our jobs, in our weeks, in our days, and we have to balance two things: the innovation backlog, the ideas in our heads, and the security backlog. And on the innovation side, we're really excited about bringing the power of natural language into the developer workflow. And I have on my t-shirt here now, Copilot speaks my language, right? Because it literally speaks my language, German and English. It speaks Hindi, it speaks French, Brazilian Portuguese. And so it's so much easier now to explore an idea by going into Copilot. Actually, the funny thing, it's either your Copilot or our Copilot, and it kind of does the same thing, right? Once you know how to prompt a Copilot, you can just say, okay, I want to build a web page, and it starts rendering the code. And on the Power Platform side, it keeps the code hidden, and it focuses on the visual output. On the GitHub side, it shows you the code or the diff. And so earlier this year, we announced something called CoPilot Workspace, which we think is like rethinking the developer workflows. Instead of you picking up an issue and checking out the code, installing all the dependencies on your computer, opening VS Code, you can just take that issue and say, open it in a workspace. And what it does, it uses an agent that looks at the current code base and the issue to figure out what is the current behavior and what's the new behavior, and it describes that in human language to you, which is already mind-blowing for both the PM and the engineer, right? Because oftentimes, even in human interaction, the instructions that we're giving our coworkers or our friends of what we expect them to do are not sharp enough for you to actually do exactly. And even if you mean the same thing and I say the correct English sentence, you might hear something totally different. And then 6 weeks later, you come back and you present your work result to me, and I'm like, oh shit, that's not what I actually wanted from you, right? And then once you have that specification, now you go into a planning phase where it shows you all the files that you have to modify, that the Copilot wants to modify. And again, that's super powerful, because going into an existing code base, trying to figure out which file does what, where are the unit tests, where is the model view controller, all these kind of components is a hard part of the job. And more often than not, if you're on a new project, you forget, doing a little thing, and then the coworker calls you out in a pull request. And then the third agent, once you have figured out that plan and you have modified and said, well, I want to update the README, and you forgot, that one file here, I want to change, something in the database connection or so, or install an open source package, then you can have CoPilot implement all these changes and try them out, in real time, change the code, change the natural language layer, and then submit a pull request, and that has a link back to the workspace. And so it's kind of like kids in school, in math. You're not only showing up with the result, you also have to show your work.
Exactly.
You have to show how you get to that result, so we will have that result in the future on every single change that we make to the code base. So with that, I think I have a video that I can show you all.
I would
works.
love to share CoPilot Workspace with
Yeah.
this crew, because it is so cool, and it is a huge inspiration for a lot of things we're doing at the Power Platform layer as well.
Cool,
So yeah, if we have a video, let's
I don't
play
know if I
it.
Started with your
Have a
work
clicker?
usually takes
Oh, does
place
it just
looking at a
work?
project board and navigating to GitHub issues. CoPilot Workspace brings your favorite AI assistant into a native dev environment designed for everyday tasks. For example, it can use the information in your GitHub issue along with references from your repository to build out a specification based on the current state and proposed state. And you can tailor the spec as you need, whether that's adding, editing, or removing items. Once ready, you can progress from spec to plan, and the process feels familiar. With the ability to adjust the plan as you need by creating, modifying, or removing files and adjusting the expected tasks for each step. This leaves you in control, free to solve the higher level problems and build out your plan before getting into the finer details of writing code. CoPilot Workspace then streams the suggested changes to our environment. Notice that we have a diff view to easily digest the changes and can easily make updates within the editor. But that's not all. At our fingertips, we have access to an integrated terminal, so we can run the tests in our workspace before committing our changes and creating a pull request. And what if you want to make use of advanced features like step-through debugging? No problem. Create a code space and pick up where you left off. When you raise your pull request with CoPilot Workspace, it generates a description for you and automatically adds a link to your workspace, adding a little bit more context for the reviewer and supporting their code review workflow. And as it's a pull request, our usual checks trigger, including GitHub action workflows and code scanning. CoPilot Workspace leaves you in control, solving the higher level problems and iterating quickly over the solution.
Wow. That is pretty cool.
And I think, the most amazing thing is if you watch that demo, especially here, at Power Platform conference, you can kind of see how the no-low code world and the pro-code world are coming together with the power of natural language prompting and copilots.
Yeah.
And while we're not there today where those two tools are directly, coming together, I can see that future ahead of us in the coming years where, whether you want to start, on the no-code side or on the pro-code side, by learning how to prompt, how to describe the problem you're trying to solve, you can switch back and forth between, the natural language layer, which is ultimately very creative, but non-deterministic and has challenges with ambiguity, down to the code layer, which is effectively a reflection, an abstraction layer on top of the machine of the CPU, and you can jump back and forth of those and learn on both sides of the spectrum of how to become a better developer.
Yeah, so that is the dream, right? To be able to sort of transit every layer of the stack and abstraction with the least amount of friction possible. And I think every year we get a little bit closer to that goal, and it just keeps going faster. I do know that, talking to a lot of customers this week, one of the things that makes people worried about that and worried about that pace is this broader conversation about security. You talked earlier about the innovation backlog and the security backlog, and in some cases, those are the sort of opposite ends of the spectrum pulling at each other a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit more about how GitHub is thinking about that? And as you're thinking about CoPilot and all this non-deterministic workflow, how do we make our code more secure?
These two backlogs, from my perspective, are the biggest challenge that we are facing today in the software industry. There's, on the one side, all the ideas, the innovation. Most teams and companies I've met with have way too many of those, and I think at GitHub, our backlog is so long that the only way I'm ever going to see an empty backlog is by retiring and making that somebody else's problem. And at the same time, we live in an ever more complex environment, whether it's security vulnerabilities, hostile actor attacks, but also compliance regulations, especially in Europe with GDPR and DMA and the DSA, or now the new California AI regulation. And of course, things like accessibility and other things that are really important to our customers, SOC 2 compliance, ISO, and all these things, right? And so now you're here as an engineering manager, and you're thinking, okay, so where do I put all my chips? Where do I put my headcount, as we say, right, in big corporations? And there's no right answer, because if you put it all on that security backlog, you get no innovation done, and you're falling behind the market. If you put it all on the innovation side, you're falling behind because your customers are losing the trust, and trust is a tricky thing, because it's much harder to gain than to lose. And once you lost it, it's really hard to get it back. And so security, powered by AI, is the next frontier from our perspective. Today, most security tooling just adds to the backlog. It finds more issues. I'm sure, Ryan, you have an S360 dashboard. That's the thing that we have at Microsoft that shows leaders all their findings, including Windows patches and things that we have to solve. And it's never really green, because by the time you're back to green, there's a new security vulnerability in an open source library or a new Windows patch day, right? And so you have to balance these two. And with CoPilot Autofix, one of our newest features, we can automatically remediate those security vulnerabilities. So we're not only finding them, we are also helping the developer to fix them. We'd like to say, found means fixed. So if you will, we finally invented the dishwasher for software developers that actually not only finds out that the dishes are dirty, but also cleans the dishes for you. So we have another video for that, so let's have a quick look.
I would love to see the dishwasher video. That sounds great.
The primary challenge I face as a developer when I see a security issue be raised in a pull request is knowing what to fix and how to fix it. With GitHub Copilot Autofix, I get clear information about what's wrong with my code and a suggestion on how to resolve the problem. I can commit that suggestion right here, and the scan will rerun, so that way I can be assured that the fix did in fact resolve the issue. This is great to ensure that new code doesn't get pushed with vulnerabilities, but what about my existing tech debt? If I bring up an existing alert, I can allow Copilot Autofix to generate the fix for me. I will see that updated information about what went wrong with my code and the opportunity to create a brand new pull request with that updated fix. With GitHub Copilot Autofix, found means fixed.
Wow. I know every engineer on my team is signing up for that right now. I don't know about you all.
And I think really the amazing piece here is that we're getting into a world where AI models, AI agents are helping us to make our day-to-day easier. So we have more time to focus on the things we love doing and use AI to help us with the things that we don't love doing. And that's, I think, where the dishwasher analogy works really well.
100%. Well, look, this conversation about innovation backlog and security backlog, this is really the crux of the whole thing. And I would love to use that as a chance to actually broaden this conversation.
Yes.
We have a couple of other guests with us here today. And I'd love to invite up Dr. Jamie Teevan, who is Chief Scientist and Technical Fellow here at Microsoft, helping really the brains behind a lot of our Microsoft 365 Copilot operation. Thank you, Jamie.
Hey. Nice
Welcome. And Vasu Jakkal, who's the Corporate Vice President leading our Microsoft security business. Welcome, Vasu. Yep. Great to have you. We have literally the innovation backlog and the security backlog on stage with us right now.
The two extremes.
We're very grateful for you spending the time with us both. Thank you for coming. Let's start with the security backlog. So we were just looking at just some of the amazing stuff with found and fixed in GitHub. Vasu, what's top of mind for you right now when you think about sort of the security challenges in front of us in this time?
Yeah, first of all, Ryan, thank you for having me here. It's such an honor and treat to be here. And I love that video, dishwasher and security harness. I never thought I would see those two words in a sentence, but great. So what's top of mind, Ryan? It's really security. Yeah. And we live in one of the most complex threat landscapes that I have ever seen. I think our world has ever seen. Thomas, you touched on it. And let me share some stats on why that is so. Just in the last 2 years, we've seen identity-related attacks go from 567 attacks per second to 4,000 attacks per second.
Wow.
That translates into billions and billions of attacks every single year for us. Security used to be a nation state, that means countries spying on countries, but today, ransomware has become a gig economy. And these are no longer attackers in hoodies sitting in basements, they're all around us. If cybercrime were a country, it would have the third largest GDP in the world.
Wow.
And it's the highest growing GDP. Just think about this
Yeah.
whole anti-economy that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And if you look at defenders, they're exhausted.
Yeah.
It's not just the threat landscape, but we have to understand regulations and be compliant with that. There's a proliferation of tools. They don't understand what to do. There's high complexity. So that is really top of mind, is how do we help our defenders stay ahead of this cat and mouse game and really tilt the balance in their favor. And that's where I think generative AI is going to be such a superpower for us, with Copilot for Security, helping find that needle in the haystack, helping ensure that we really are secure by design and default. And I'm excited about the possibilities.
Oh, man. Well, I am grateful that there are people like you helping keep us all safe and equip people with the tools to keep everybody safe. And it's cool to think about that as a space of innovation in and of itself. But I guess maybe, Jamie, I'll go to you then. Just when we think about innovation in general, you and your team have been bringing so much amazing change into this world of productivity. What's top of mind for you these days?
Yeah, it's a good question, and so AI is obviously top of mind. And I've been doing AI for decades now. I got my Ph.D. from the AI lab at MIT. This is something that I've been thinking about for a long time. And there's actually sort of maybe two interesting things. So one of the interesting things is the models are amazing, and there's a lot of interesting research happening in that space that will continue to move forward. But even if the models stayed the same, we have so much need for research and innovation and work just to figure out how to use them. And so a lot of what we're doing right now is focused on how do we bring large language models into productivity experiences? How do we ground it in your personal data? It's actually, those are the most interesting research questions. And in many ways, the most interesting research in the world is happening very close to product and where we're bringing AI
And
to
you can
people.
tell with the speed at which things are shifting. It is so cool to be in this time where research is not a decade out.
Correct.
It's
It's
much,
super
much
exciting.
closer.
It's a great time as a scientist.
Yeah.
It is.
But it strikes me, Vasu, you make the point that the threat landscape is also changing very quickly, and a lot of the conversations that I've had with customers this week and over the last year, particularly those very concerned about security and the security implications of Power Platform and generative AI together, there's this sort of this urge to stop things and slow things down and not move fast, and it strikes me that there is risk in going too fast, to Thomas's point earlier, but there's also a ton of risk in standing still.
Oh, totally.
How does Microsoft think about balancing those two extremes? How do we get the right level of speed, even for our own company and our own pace of innovation?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ryan. And I love that we're talking about innovation and security, because they really do go hand in hand. And you cannot have great innovation without great security. It really starts with that. And just talking to a lot of customers like you, when I go to them, they've said 98% of organizations are using AI. Their users are using AI in some form. Only 1% of risk leaders feel ready to tackle that. So you're seeing that tension. But I'm extremely optimistic about making sure that we can have great security, which then leads also to great innovation. And at Microsoft, our approach has been, we've made security our #1 priority. I mean, as Satya, our CEO, said, security above all else, because that's where it starts, that's where trust is. And without trust in the technology that we use to live, to breathe, to work, we cannot really drive great innovation. So that's where it starts for us. And we have embraced these principles of secure by design. I thought Thomas's examples were beautiful, like how GitHub Copilot and how Power Platform is helping with that secure by design. So the first line of code that you write, it comes with that security out of the box. secure by default. Things like multi-factor authentication, we've got to embrace these and we've got to make it frictionless. And then we've got to have secure operations all around. So that's been our mantra for what we call the Secure Future Initiative, which we launched last November, and we're doubling down. And as we do that, Ryan, we are also looking at how do we take these best practices and this tooling that we are building for securing Microsoft, and we give it to all our customers who operate in heterogeneous worlds.
Yeah.
And this is where our CoPilot for Security, which is a generative AI tool, like helping you really find that needle in the haystack, helping you do security by design, by default. Things like our data security tooling, like Purview, which makes sure that you're thinking about data lifecycle and protecting it, whether it's at rest, whether it's moving, you're thinking about governance integrated is really going to come to the picture. So for us, security is above all else at Microsoft. We're thinking about it through our principles and also building tooling. And that's kind of my feedback to our customers, do that same blueprint, use that blueprint, because AI is going to be used by bad actors as well.
Right.
We know that. They can be very creative about it. And if we don't use AI to secure ourselves, and if we don't think about security differently, then we're going to be left behind.
That is such a good point, right? We have to apply the technology, and we have to go not pretend that it doesn't exist or try to resist it, but we have to find the right way to apply it. And I want to come back to actually something, Jamie, you said a minute ago about the distance between kind of the early research and the application. My partner at home is a cancer researcher and does a lot of early stage life sciences research, much smarter than me. But in that world, again, that distance between the early stage research and actual large scale application is so long traditionally. In this world, it's really compressing. I'd love you to talk a little bit more about how you're thinking about that compression and how we kind of make the research itself very practical and applied in the lives of everyday users.
Yeah, no, and so one of the big shifts that I've seen actually in the research landscape recently is how much everybody understands that we're figuring something new out, and so our customers are really leaning into research as well. So we've been the biggest question that we probably all get is how is AI actually when the sort of rubber hits the road? How is it actually driving change? And it's been cool with our when CoPilot. We announced M365 Copilot maybe a year and a half ago. It only went to general availability in November, so it's been a very fast time, and we're trying to figure out how that works. Our customers actually worked with us in those early deployments to do random allocation of those early precious seats. So we were, there was a lot of constraints as we were rolling out, and they took those seats, randomly allocated them so that we could do randomized controlled trials.
Oh, cool.
And get scientifically valid insights
that's neat.
into how AI and language models change people's work practices. And we're starting to get data from that. So we see, for example, that people with CoPilot create 10% more documents. They read 11% fewer emails because they're getting summaries for that content. And the interesting thing about this, so first of all, that's huge. Those are huge gains. And those are in real world contexts that you're seeing that impact. And the interesting thing is that's the first baby step. This is us using AI in the dumbest possible ways. We know AI is great for summarization, and so people are summarizing their emails and having to read fewer emails. We know it's great for content generation, so people are creating more content. But you can actually sort of even see the irony there. Are we all just using AI to create more content and and summarize that content? And so that's where we're essentially entering now wave 2, where we're figuring out how workflows change. And you can see in the starts of the data, some of that show up. You do see as people use CoPilot over time, that the gains get bigger. You see variation by role and function. You see variation by industry. So it shows that there are places where we already know how to get those gains. And I think as workflows continue to evolve, we're gonna see even more amazing shifts.
I love that analogy of the waves, and we've been really public, even just earlier this week, talking about all the amazing stuff in Wave 2 of Copilot for Microsoft, and I assume you had a big role in a lot of the stuff that went on there, so thank you for coming and spending time with us in the midst of a very busy week. Yes. It's interesting, we use that analogy too in the security space, that Secure Future initiative. We have waves of sprints of work as we really harden a lot of our core systems, and I wonder if this is something I'll open up to the whole group, but as we think about not just wave 1 or 2, but 3 or 10 or 12, and start to think about where this goes in this future, it strikes me that a lot of our popular culture about the AI future is very dystopian. It's very sort of concerned. And I think the kinds of improvements we're talking about here are not that science fiction and not that scary. In fact, they're really great improvements for both the security and the innovation of what people do. I would love to kind of hear, as you all imagine that future, what are the positive outcomes that you look forward to?
Ryan, can I add, because
Please,
I did want to build on what Jamie. First of all, I'm a massive optimist in general, and I do believe in utopia. And on top of that, I'm a science fiction fan. I'm a big Trekkie, so for all you Trekkies out there, live long and prosper. But I do
that's getting some applause out there,
But I do feel that AI is going to elevate the human potential. And I want to build on the randomized controlled trials that, Jamie, you talked about. Because I may be biased, but security is my favorite use case of AI. Because we've just seen real returns. And we did this. One of the things that I'm super excited about is our talent in security. We've had a really hard time getting talent and helping talent quickly adapt into security environments. We have a 4 million job shortage. There's unfulfilled jobs right now in security. So huge, huge challenge. And with Copilot for Security, what we saw was that whether you are early in your career or you're a seasoned professional, you're seeing massive gains. So 26% faster if you use Copilot, if you're just starting your journey. 22 faster if you're a seasoned professional. These are huge gains, thinking of the asymmetry that I just talked about. And they're more accurate, right? 45% more accurate in some cases. And then there's an index I call the Joy Index. It's how many people want to use Copilot again. And I can assure you, in security, no one wakes up and says, that is the most amazing tool. I'm so excited about going into my portal and launching it. But 90% plus people wanted to use Copilot for Security again. That to me is a game changer.
That's
so
huge.
I do think AI is going to help us with security. I do believe that it's going to elevate the human potential. And I do believe it's going to help us be safer. We just have to think about security very comprehensively and really embrace it from a cultural standpoint as well.
100%.
And I think building on top what Vasu is saying, for security is also true for many other parts of life. My favorite example is actually seeing kids using Copilot to learn coding and learning, how to do stuff, and whether it's actually, rendering puppy images with an image model, and kids are really good at just figuring out, okay, if the image isn't exactly what I want, they don't do what we often do and are skeptical, and they're like, this doesn't actually work. They just prompt again and get a cuter image until they get to the point where they have 1,000 images in their image library, and then, one of my favorite use cases actually is AI, but nobody realizes this is AI. It's that you can now just search in your image library for license plates, and it shows you all the photos of all the cars that you took with the license plate. So when you have to enter the license plate at the parking machine, you don't have to actually go back to your car to figure out what is your current license plate. If you take that to coding, right, it democratizes access to technology in the same way that it democratizes access to security. It works in almost any major human language, and so if you're a kiddo in New Delhi or in Cape Town or in Berlin, Germany, you can just use the language that you speak, that your parents taught you, and often not English, to learn coding. While the coding world, the open source world is predominantly English. Try to, send a message to an open source maintainer, even more so an influential one in Bahasa or Brazilian Portuguese, and they were going to look at you and say, well, English only here, and so that democratizes that access, and also means that you no longer have to have parents at home that you can go to ask questions.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're all executives at Microsoft here. We have limited time and limited patience, and I don't like to spend my evenings answering coding questions and debugging Python code. I mean, I do, but not all night long.
Simply not
And
true.
so I am a buyer of 2 Copilot licenses for my 2 kids, so they can solve their own problems. And that actually empowers them to learn, I think, a very fundamental human skill, which is like figuring out how to solve your own problems and how to then take that skill set to create something. And it's like the dopamine hit that they're getting out of that is, I think, even better than scrolling through TikTok.
Yeah, no, what you're saying hits home for me very much. I snuck away from the event last night to call my kids before they went to bed, and my 10-year-old said, Dad, I got together with a few friends at school. We're going to start a business on the internet. And we're going to use AI to help us make it. And I said, that's amazing. What are you going to sell? We don't know yet.
Well, it sounds like $1 billion startup.
We got a great team. Anyway.
But I think actually, I will say, I think that's when you want to think about like the interesting part. It's like, how can AI, a lot of the way we're thinking about AI right now is largely how AI can obey us, right? Like it can do, and that's why we're using it in sort of uncreative ways. We're like, I've got this existing workflow. How do I apply it to my existing workflow? And there's a benefit there, but it's actually like, I think it gets more exciting when you start thinking about how AI is going to challenge us and like help us think of new things. We kind of joke, AI has largely solved, there's something called the blank page problem. You all know, like, it's in coding too. Like, you sit down, you've got just an empty nothing, and you're like, what do I put down? And it solved that because it generates content, great, but it's created a new blank page problem, which is the blank prompt box. And like, we largely, we have to figure out how to describe what we want. It largely increases the metacognitive burden on us as we go and try and do things. But what we're learning is actually we're starting to play around with like having Copilot ask you questions or prompt you or like, oh, you want to start a business? That's great. What should that be? What are you thinking about? What are new ways to think about that? And like solving that problem is exciting. And then imagine what we're going to do if like people are like, I want to start a business, and we help them like bring their best. So it's not just about like telling the AI what to do. We're getting the best out of the AI. It's like using AI to bring out what's the best in us.
I love that vision, and that's so cool. It's not just this great piece of intelligence that we've put in the corner and said only react when somebody talks to you. It's really huge potential to kind of push and advance the skills of a lot of people. And I think, Thomas, we were speaking earlier about kind of the increasingly overlapping mission of GitHub and Power Platform to really, just change the economics of who can build software and the reach of who can be successful with technology. How far do you think that goes? If you take this whole trend to the limit, do we all become software developers in some form? I'd love to hear what you think about that.
I truly hope so. And earlier this year, I spoke at TED, and I outlined that vision of that. I hope by 2030, maybe sooner, there will be 1 billion software developers on this planet. And the way I think about this is like today, we're teaching kids reading and writing and math and social studies and painting and playing an instrument, but not everybody, who learns how to sing in school becomes, the next Taylor Swift or Beyonce or the Foo Fighters, right? And you don't want to hear me singing. Only the shower hears me singing. But we're learning all these skills because we want to be able to have, all these options available to us when we grow up and decide what we want to become. And in software, basically, we're only teaching kids to read, but not to write today, right? Like, we're teaching them how to use a computer. Some do computer science, but it thins out very fast into like 10% or 5% of the class. The nerds, the Dungeons and Dragons and coding, the same club of people.
We take that as a compliment.
And I think that needs to change. I think that in the first grade, kids need to learn coding as one part of skill, and coding will mean writing prompts and learning how to prompt and understanding the intricacies of the prompt layer and the code layer and the machine layer. And then when they're grown up, they can decide, I want to become, a professional software developer, or, I have that skill, and when I do my taxes, I can just, now use in Excel the Copilot to render Python. I mean, how great is it that Excel now got Python support after 3 decades of crappy, macro languages instead of a proper high-level language. No, but like this shows where the world is going, where everybody will be empowered to use their creativity to build software.
Yeah. What you're saying is we're going to need a much bigger room over the next couple of years for events like this, which is great. And it's so cool to see that community really evolving and all the individual examples of what people are doing in it. I'd love to come back to Jamie and Vasu. I'd love to hear some more examples. What examples that really inspired you of kind of what people are doing early on at the edges of what Copilot can do.
Yeah, good. So one of the things that this is sort of thinking through the way workflows change, and actually thinking about the use of natural language, and this challenge that I was talking about, where it's like, oh, what does it mean to create content? We see people creating content in new ways and in like more collaborative ways, actually. So Dow Chemical. Teams meeting, CoPilot is probably the most popular use of CoPilot, where we'll actually record a meeting. And like the kind of obvious use is people use it to get a summary. You're like, oh great, I don't have to go to that meeting. I can see what happened. But I like the new ways people are starting to use it. Dow Chemical has meetings to create documents, where they're like essentially brainstorming meetings.
Oh, that's
and
so
then
cool.
out of that you get an artifact and a plan. Like that's an entirely new way of creating content. And actually, you mentioned the announcement we had on Monday. One of the things that we announced was something called CoPilot Pages, which is about taking these conversations and actually starting to turning the conversation into an artifact that persists. We do need to be thinking about like what are these persistent artifacts that come out of us using natural language. So I think there's this interesting piece of like, how do you help people have great conversations and talk about great things, and then how do you translate that into information artifacts that are reusable and like provide value over time?
I love that example, and that's so cool. I mean, a lot of times we think about work as the rote part, the typing up of the document after, but the work is the meeting,
cool
it's the ideation, it's the substance in the first place. And it's really neat to be shifting kind of more of that focus into the work.
And then, actually, sorry, just because I get excited about all this stuff. So like that's a great way. Like one of the things that happens then is like the conversation we have can become a persistent artifact that is reusable in different ways. But because AI operates at scale. We can do that at an even larger scale. So you could imagine, like, this is a conversation that we're all participating in. We've got thousands of people participating in this conversation. Imagine capturing the thoughts and reactions of everybody in this room and turning that into persistent knowledge. Like that opportunity for collective intelligence. Is a really significant, like it's a new way of thinking about collaboration.
Absolutely, that is so cool. That's the good kind of science fiction, right?
Totally, and I'll build on that, Ryan. I think from a security standpoint and using Copilot, I see 2 really cool things happening. One is just the number of skills you get as a defender. And what I mean by that is typically you specialize in a certain domain in security. So you are really good at doing security operations or hunting for threats or doing data security or reverse engineering. And it's hard for any one human to have all these skill sets, let alone be advanced in that. But now with Copilot, you get these skills. So just think about having your virtual defended team, which is giving you, hey, I want to do reverse engineering, and it's what we call a prompt book. So it's a series of prompts that you just launch, and Copilot does that for you. It guides you to, do you want to do that? It helps you take actions directly from your tool. So that's, I think, really cool, that expansion of skills. And then the second one, which I'm deeply passionate about, is, we've always said at Microsoft that security should be for all, no matter who you are, no matter what organization you are, and it should be done by all. But it's been really hard to get talent in security, and especially from a diversity standpoint, like there's 24% of women in security. So I think that Copilot is going to help reduce the barriers of entry for every person to be a defender. So it's going to be easy to be a defender because right now it's really easy to be an attacker. It's not so easy to be a defender.
Yeah.
And it's going to help us expand security and include people that we've never been able to include before. And the reason that diversity is important is there's diversity in attackers. So if our defenders do not reflect the diversity in the world, how can we stay ahead? So I'm really excited about how Copilot can help every defender with this myriad of skills, and then how we can just have more defenders and more diverse defenders as well.
Oh, I love that perspective. And a lot of people think sort of just about what's in front of them inside of their own organization and what they already have. But thinking about what is outside and what could be is just such a bigger perspective. And I think this community has been on that journey for a long time. We've faced a lot of skeptics in our road, people who said, oh, we're never going to let amateurs write software with low code. And I think a lot of people are really feeling like we've just gotten to this level of sort of mainstream acceptance, and now we're setting another challenge into the world with AI. I was in a customer meeting last year in a customer in a country in Europe I won't name, but I walk in to across the table from a very serious CIO who said, there will be no AI in this company. Sort of got, should I put my laptop away? But what do you say to the skeptics? How do you sort of address that very natural concern and turn it into something a little more open-minded and positive?
Yeah, I told you I believe in utopia. I think the first step just starts with education.
Yeah.
Many times I feel we fear the unknown and we fear what we don't understand. And just helping people understand both the potential of AI, the risk of AI, and how to deal with that risk is a very helpful start. And this is where I think what we have done with risk leaders who are like, absolutely not, we're not going to engage in AI. We first of all we have tools which show them that your users are already using AI.
Right.
So it starts with look, 98%, again, going back to our start on organizations, are using AI. You want to make sure that you use AI safely and you use the right AI because people are going to use it.
Yeah.
And then helping them understand, well, how do you secure AI?
Right.
It starts with discovery. It starts with then protection and then governance and helping them get the tools. So taking that fear out of the system, helping them understand that adoption is happening and bad actors are using it, and the risks that come with it if they are not ahead of it, and then what's the framework for them to adopt AI safely. And then at Microsoft, we have a very stringent guideline. We use responsible AI, which we have principles around not just security, but privacy and fairness and inclusion and equality, which are part of that. Our tools go through this rigorous testing to make sure they're secure, helping them understand that. Like these AI tools are safe, and then what they can do and the questions they can ask to their teams for that adoption of AI. So those are some of the things I think organizations can do and embrace AI for its potential.
I love the focus on learning, and sort of demystifying the abstract concern just by getting hands-on and being curious and adopting it. And I would say that's also something I think this community can really relate to, is just a lot of applied curiosity and growth. And one of the things that's been really special about Power Platform is it really has helped propel a lot of careers forward in this group. And I think that gets very exciting when you look at the years ahead of us and all the things we're talking about, from coding to general innovation and productivity in teams and security. You all have also had very amazing careers in your lives. I'd wonder if you could kind of share some advice with this group, from a growth perspective, a development perspective, a career perspective. What should we all be thinking about in the years ahead, just as individuals?
Yeah. Maybe I'll go and then ask
we can just,
I think one of the things that I've learned is, we've got to adopt an abundant mindset and a growth mindset. And one of the reasons, going back to your question on people are afraid because we sometimes tend to think about scarcity. That what if this takes away this job, or what if it's not secure? And I just really feel that we have so much abundance around us. Let's embrace that. We don't even know what possibilities we're going to unleash. I love Jamie's point on, we're just at the tip of the spear here, but who's going to make it real? The people in this room. Look around. It's not magically going to happen. So just assuming that abundant mindset, I feel passionately about that growth mindset. And then, hey, we are in this together, right? This is a team sport. So my advice would be, those are to me the three things. We are in this together. It's not about any one individual. we have to learn, we have to be curious, and let's really work together on the betterment of our world, because a better world, a safer world, abundant world, isn't that what we are here for? So that's been my philosophy of life, and hopefully that's going to help.
I love that. I love that. Yeah.
Good. I love that too. And actually, like the cool thing is that we have a model. We all have a model that we actually learned in school around learning, and that is the scientific method. And I actually think this is a real opportunity to lead like scientists. It is roughly a time where science, like there's a ton of ambiguity. We don't know what's happening, that we don't know what's going on, and like science is the approach for making sense of ambiguity. And that of course means like develop hypotheses and metrics and test them and experiment and iterate and learn. I would say there's another part of the scientific process though that your kids also learn, which is actually about communication. And for one, it's really important to learn. There is no way that you can be inventing, what's going on right now on your own. You have to read a lot. It's brilliant that you all are here at this conference learning. Like, you need to be building on the state of the art. And then the scientific process is also about publishing and sharing, and how do you communicate what you've learned. And actually, you do that partly so that others can build on you, but you also do that for validation. That's the peer review process. And actually, that ability to share what you're learning is an opportunity to get feedback and critique and debate and grow. And then I would actually say also, to your point of like, think about the long-term implications. Like, there is actually every part of every academic paper that I write has like a, looking forward section that is about thinking about the long-term implications and externalities of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, oh, that's so cool. Experiment, communicate, learn, and think forward. And so many of us in technical communities kind of do that by nature, even without it being formal science.
No, and when you can put it into that structure, it's useful because it kind of helps you be like, oh yes, so you can actually start carrying those processes forward.
That's pretty cool. All right, Thomas, those are two great pieces of career advice. Be abundant, be a scientist. What else can you add? How are we all going to get promoted next year?
I don't know about that. But I have three. I already talked about passion earlier. I think you have to be passionate about what you do. I hope you're feeling this from the four of us today. I felt it when talking with many of you yesterday on the show floor. So I think passion is my number one. And my number two is you have to trust yourself in making the right decisions. And you only know in hindsight, looking backwards in your life, that you made the right decisions. We got here by random decisions at the time. It probably felt like that. Somebody on the internet said something along the lines of, 99% of the time, the right time is now. Right? And not tomorrow or in a year from now. If you're just pushing out the decision that you're trying to make to jump into AI, you're probably wasting your time. The third one, I got from Arnold Schwarzenegger, who says reps, reps, reps. In his 70-something tricks. And if you think about this, the best artists still rehearse. The best musicians rehearse before they go on tour. The best sportsmen train. And the same is true for our jobs. You get better by doing it over and over again, and by very intentionally thinking about what is exercise, what is rehearsal, and what's the actual performance. And those two are separate. They're not the same thing. You're not rehearsing on stage in a conference. You're rehearsing before the conference. And I think you get better. You get better at your craft, of building software by building more software. And I think that's really just something to keep in mind. Nobody grows up and becomes the next Mick Jagger without constantly rehearsing what they love doing with their passion.
That is excellent advice. And I, for one, love training and exercising in Power Platform a lot more than actual exercising. Those are great pieces of advice all together. And I think implicit in a lot of them is not just what we do as individuals, but a lot of how we interact with the people around us and the communities around us. And I think that is a really important part for this community. It's also very critical in software development in general. And I'm kind of curious how you all are thinking about that world of collaboration and community, of open source and sharing. How does that change in this world of AI or evolve?
First of all, I want to say, I truly believe open source has won because it's the best collaboration model that we have.
Yeah.
Like, it's not only that we have access to all the source code, we have found a way of working with each other around the world, millions of software developers on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And if you get a pull request on a Sunday night, you don't care who that person is. You see the handle, often you don't even see their real name. You don't know whether they have a PhD or not, whether it's sitting in the org chart, what that title is. And if you work in a big company, I'm sure you had that moment where you get an email from somebody you don't know, and the first thing you do is look up, what is who's their manager, and how do they relate to you? Do I actually have to respond to that person? Can just tell them to go away, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't exist in open source because it's focused on, a joint mission of building a better world in software.
Yeah.
And I think, taking that into companies, burning down the silos, the walled gardens.
Yeah.
AI will help us doing that because it makes it so much easier to, get started on a different project, to figure out because it can describe the code to me, it can help me identify what's in which file, it makes it easier for me to run all through the steps that team requires me to do before I can then submit a pull request to them. I think we are just really lowering the barrier of entry, not only for the software profession, but also for collaborating in big companies together.
And maybe I'll build on that because it's a similar thing for security.
Yeah, of course.
For a long time, security did not really embrace this collaboration ethos, and we need to change that because we've learned some hard lessons, even in the last 6 months, on when we don't collaborate, we can't really defend, and we need to defend well.
Yeah.
And recently, taking open source software and security as an example, we actually, for Windows, which is our open source platform, we brought security endpoint vendors and ecosystem to collaborate on how do we do better security and resiliency. So there is this whole concept of team sport is very, very central for us to be a security community. And like Thomas, I'm a big believer in the power of open source and focusing on creation and then using the best of everyone to get there.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And I loved hearing Thomas's answer too because it actually made me think a little bit about the artifacts of collaboration.
Yeah.
Microsoft in many ways is a document company. Like we were founded on creating documents. And we are, and like actually there's a ton of, like we are the world's best at that. Like how you share them, inherit permissions, like it's a very complicated thing. But I think things like code and the Power Platform offer new collaborative artifacts that make a lot of sense in a world with AI. And so I think there's a lot that we can learn from there. And I think this notion of what a document and how we collaborate and what the artifacts of our knowledge are that persist is going to evolve a lot.
There are new kinds of documents, right?
Correct.
And maybe it's indicative of our culture. A lot of people may not know this, but internally, the thing you save when you save a Power App, we call that the document. It doesn't look anything like a piece of paper, but but it's a collection of text and artifacts and other assets that represent experiences, and I think that gets very exciting. So Jamie, I'll stay on you, and we'll go to the last question here because we're almost to time. But I'm going to ask this to everybody, but I'll embarrass myself. I'm a little bit of a fan. I saw a talk that you gave last year where you described, kind of after the first time you saw one of the new GPT models, which you get to see before a lot of the rest of us, driving home, initially just being very skeptical, but then by the end, driving home and having to pull over your car and just have this amazing, oh my gosh moment. And I think
I actually screamed. I literally screamed.
And I love that anecdote, and I can really viscerally relate to it. I think a lot of us have kind of had that moment at some point in the last couple of years. I'm curious, what gives you that feeling now? As we think about what's coming next and where this goes over the next even just year or so, what are you each most excited about?
Yeah, well, and I mean, to be fair, I think we are in the middle of, and so it was a year and a half ago, and it's now, we're in the middle of the largest transformation that we have seen. It's not like that happens every day. That was just we are still, I'm still screaming. It is, this is such a big transition, and actually I get really excited about this. When we are old and gray. We're going to be telling they're like, you were alive before large language models, and we'll be like telling stories about like, oh yes, and like we're figuring this out, and we're like, the stuff we're doing right now is laying the groundwork for a really new and hopefully brighter and better world. And I would say there's absolutely no way that those of us at Microsoft are inventing that, and certainly not alone. And that's why this group and this community is so important, is the innovation and invention that you do is what's going to drive that future and create it. So like, you know, I just like, I get like chills thinking about what it is going to be like in decades from now, looking back on this moment.
I love it.
Yeah. Wow, I'm getting chills too. I do believe, like +1000, that we are in the middle of this incredible transformation, and perhaps we have the most consequential technology of our lifetimes in our hands, and we're just at the cusp of it. And I love the point on the community, because it's going to take all of us to get there. And you know, one of my favorite quotes has been, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Yeah. So what Power Platform has done and what your community has done is create that future. And now with tools like AI, I'm just excited, because I do believe it's fundamentally going to change who we are as humans and how we live.
You know, when I was a teenager in Germany, I looked, you know, at the West Coast and Microsoft and Apple, and I thought I missed, you know, the PC revolution, right? Because in the 90s there was already Windows, and Apple became big, and I think, you know, 20 years later, or almost 30 years later now, I'd say, well, not really, because there's always another revolution, and we're in the middle of probably the biggest we have ever seen. And I think, you know, if you think about this, there's innovation and startups at the GPU layer. There's now actually Silicon Valley has silicon companies again. They're producing in Asia, but they're inventing, you know, new chips and, you know, to run these transformer model more efficiently. There's incredible innovation and competition at the model layer. There's obviously lots of competition at the cloud and kernel layer, if you will. And then we're in the middle of all of the, and then there's the CoPilot layer and the ecosystem layer. And we're in the middle of all of that as Microsoft, almost 50 years after our founding. And I think, you know, this is like the most exciting time that I've seen as a developer after 30 years being in that industry. And I think that's, you know, the one thing that keeps me up at night, if you will, in a positive way, similar to Jamie yelling at her car, at herself, at the excitement. And I think, that's what, you know, keeps me driving.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, look, this has been a really energizing conversation, and I'm really grateful to all of you, and really grateful to all of you for being part of this conversation. My hope is that we keep having this conversation and take it home and have it with our colleagues and our collaborators and in our communities. But for right now, join me in thanking these amazing people for joining us.
Thank you.
Awesome.